Alcatraz is the true pioneer of the supermax prison concept.
Beneath the frigid, dark waters surrounding Alcatraz,
And it has a way of breaking the spirit of the most hardened criminal.
a diver made a startling discovery that no one saw coming. Could it be tied to the infamous escape of the Alcatraz prisoners, or reveal a clue to a long-buried secret? This unexpected find has sparked worldwide intrigue.
Some of the greatest stories ever told start behind bars. Locked up in the most notorious prisons in the world, spied on by guards and fellow prisoners.
Reigniting debates and mysteries long thought closed. Join us as we explore the chilling depths and uncover the hidden truth waiting beneath the waves, where history and legend may finally converge in astonishing ways. The hidden safe beneath the bay that rekindled the Alcatraz mysteries. On a clear morning of June 4th, 2025, a group of hydrographic specialists working for the U.S. Geological Survey set out on what was supposed to be a routine mission. Their goal was to study the seabed in San Francisco Bay, checking sediment patterns as part of a project focused on coastal erosion and climate resilience. Operating from a specialized survey vessel, they used high-frequency sonar to map the underwater terrain between Angel Island and the southern edge of Alcatraz. Everything went as expected, until the equipment detected something unusual. The sonar returned a strong signal from a rectangular object hidden in a shallow depression near the historic dock of Alcatraz. It was dense, sharply shaped, and stood out clearly against the surrounding silt. At first, it was thought to be nothing more than metallic debris from a decayed pier or an old ferry wreck. Such findings were common in this sediment-rich area, but further examination revealed that this object was far from ordinary. Later that same afternoon, the team deployed a towed magnetometer array and advanced underwater LiDAR imaging. These tools revealed something surprising: precise geometric lines that did not match the irregular shapes of typical wreckage. The object measured about 30 inches wide, 24 inches tall, and 18 inches deep. It appeared to have thick walls reinforced with steel bands around the edges, much like an industrial safe from the mid-20th century. Divers noted corrosion, barnacle growth, and mechanical hinges, but there were no markings to indicate a manufacturer. No nearby debris suggested it had broken away from a larger structure. Even more puzzling, no records existed of a safe or similar cargo being lost in that area. The absence of historical documentation ruled out simple explanations. Its location, roughly 300 yards west of the prison, made it unlikely that it had been accidentally dropped during normal prison activity. This mystery raised more questions than answers. For 2 days, news of the find stayed within a small circle of officials. Plans were quietly made for recovery, and interest grew among federal historical agencies. Even the FBI took note. Soon, divers carefully retrieved the safe from the seabed and transferred it to a secure National Park Service facility. Opening it was not a quick task. The safe's heavy corrosion meant experts had to use non-destructive tools, avoiding any damage to what might be inside. When it was finally opened, the contents were astonishing. Inside was a weathered canvas bag that looked like it belonged to the 1950s, possibly military or postal issue. It held bundles of U.S. paper currency, waterlogged yet still readable. The bills, dated between the mid-1950s and 1961, totaled just under $1,800, a significant amount at the time. There were no reports linking the money to any theft or known crime, making its presence even more intriguing. The surprises did not end there. 2 small photographs, resembling Polaroids, were found sealed in protective sleeves. They showed 3 men standing beside what appeared to be a 1950s Ford Fairlane. The images were faded and water-stained, but still clear enough to provoke interest. No license plates were visible on the car, and it is suspected they might have been intentionally removed. While speculation arose about whether these men could be the infamous escapees Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, no confirmation has yet been made. The most fascinating discovery was a sealed mason jar containing rolled papers. Once unrolled, they revealed hand-drawn maps of San Francisco's stormwater tunnels along with handwritten notes. But could this truly be linked to the escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers from Alcatraz? The connection between the safe and the greatest escape mystery of Alcatraz. When the details of the strange object became public, all attention turned toward one of the most famous prison breaks in American history, the 1962 escape of Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. This daring event had long captured the public's imagination. It was said to be one of the boldest escapes ever attempted, involving months of careful tunneling, the crafting of life vests, and the creation of a raft from more than 50 stolen raincoats. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, known as The Rock, stood on a small, isolated island in San Francisco Bay. Its location was chosen specifically to prevent escapes, as the freezing water, rough currents, and powerful tides made swimming away almost impossible. Before it became a prison, the island served as a military fort in the 1850s, later becoming a place to hold military prisoners. By 1934, it had been transformed into a high-security federal prison meant for the most dangerous and unmanageable inmates, those who caused trouble wherever they were sent. Life inside Alcatraz was harsh and tightly controlled. The prison's main building, finished in the early 1900s, contained small, cold cells, a dining hall, a hospital, a library, and housing for guards. The cells were narrow, barred with thick steel, and kept under constant watch. Guards performed head counts up to 13 times a day, and armed officers watched from elevated positions. Every person entering was screened with metal detectors, and prisoners' privileges depended on good behavior. Misconduct meant losing work opportunities, visits, and other small freedoms. Some of the most infamous criminals in the country were held there, including Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. The most dangerous inmates were sent to D Block, where solitary confinement in the hole meant being locked alone in a dark, empty cell for days or even weeks. The prison's focus was not on rehabilitation, but on absolute control. Security systems were constantly upgraded with electric fences and reinforced locks. Yet, the salt air and ocean water slowly damaged the buildings. By the 1960s, maintenance costs had become too high, and on March 21, 1963, the prison was officially closed. On the night of June 11, 1962, Morris and the Anglin brothers vanished from Alcatraz. Their bodies were never found. The FBI eventually closed the case in 1979, concluding that they had drowned in the bay. However, in 2014, tidal simulations carried out by the Dutch National Institute for Water and Atmospheric Research challenged that theory. They showed that, under the right tidal conditions, a westward drift could have carried the raft toward the Marin Headlands or Angel Island. The location of the recently discovered safe falls within this same tidal corridor, an area that some independent investigators and former federal agents have long believed was part of a possible escape route. Retired FBI profiler Joel Maravich, who worked on cold case reviews in the 1990s, pointed out that if the safe was part of the escape plan, it may have been hidden in a place where no casual swimmer or fisherman would find it, yet close enough to be recovered, possibly even during low tide. What makes the connection more interesting is the fact that no confirmed belongings of the escapees, such as clothing, flotation devices, or personal items, were ever recovered. The only item linked to them was a piece of a life preserver that washed ashore miles away with no sign of the men themselves. Investigators in 1962 found evidence of meticulous planning. including an accordion converted into a bellows for inflating the raft, and the use of prison blueprints to navigate. One theory, never proven, suggested they may have had accomplices waiting outside. If true, hiding a supply cache in a safe could have made sense for their survival after leaving the island. In 2018, a letter surfaced claiming to be from John Anglin, stating that he and his brother had lived for decades under false identities and were ready to surrender. The FBI examined the letter but could not confirm or dismiss its authenticity. No records from the prison, Coast Guard, or civilian archives mention a safe being lost in that area. According to marine experts, the safe's position and the depth at which it was buried suggest it had been underwater for at least 50 years, placing its likely submersion within a decade of the escape. The safe's location is striking. It sits directly in the path many believe the escapees could have taken if they survived. That, combined with the lack of an official explanation for its presence, makes it all the more intriguing. But who were these men truly? And how did they get to plan their escape and successfully execute it? The escape that defied the rock. Frank Morris was never the kind of prisoner to sit quietly and serve his time. Known for his sharp mind and remarkable ability to slip away from confinement, he had already escaped from multiple state prisons before being sent to the one place authorities believed could hold him for good, Alcatraz. Sitting on an isolated island in San Francisco Bay and surrounded by icy, fast-moving water, the rock was built to be inescapable. For Morris, however, it was the ultimate challenge. His life had been hard from the beginning. Orphaned at 11 and in trouble with the law by 13, he bounced between foster homes without ever finding stability. Those years taught him resilience, resourcefulness, and how to think quickly under pressure. As an adult, his crimes, armed robbery, and possession of illegal substances landed him in prison time and again. But it was his repeated escapes that set him apart, making him a problem for prison officials across the country. When he fled the Louisiana State Penitentiary in 1960, he was sent straight to Alcatraz. There, Morris found himself near two men he already knew, brothers John and Clarence Anglin. The Anglins, raised in rural Florida in a poor but close-knit family, had grown up depending on one another. Their shared loyalty would later play a key role in their escape attempt. They had spent years committing bank robberies together, which eventually landed them behind bars in Atlanta Penitentiary. Their restless nature and repeated escape attempts earned them a transfer to Alcatraz, where the prison's harsh security was meant to crush any hope of breaking free. Morris, the Anglin brothers, and another inmate, Alan West, were placed in adjacent cells. This closeness allowed them to communicate quietly through the ventilation system. Night after night, they exchanged ideas until a plan began to take shape. Morris naturally assumed the role of leader, using his calm intelligence to guide the group. The prison walls were thick and reinforced, but the damp sea air had softened the concrete around the ventilation grates beneath their sinks. Using stolen spoons from the mess hall and discarded saw blades, they began chipping away at the weakened concrete. Progress was slow and risky. To hide their work, they created false vent covers from papier-mâché, painted to match the walls with stolen pigments. Noise posed another challenge. Any loud scraping could alert the guards. Morris came up with a clever solution. He played his accordion during music hour. The sound covered the noise of drilling, and the guards, thinking it was harmless entertainment, paid no mind. They even built a small drill using parts from a vacuum cleaner motor, bits of metal, and tape, powering it from a hidden electrical socket. As the holes widened enough to pass through, the group began planning for the dangerous waters surrounding Alcatraz. They gathered more than 50 stolen raincoats, cutting and stitching them into a 6-by-4-foot raft, and several life vests. To waterproof the seams, they used hot steam pipes from the prison's plumbing. Even a small concertina was repurposed into an air pump, to inflate the raft. Paddles were crafted from plywood scraps collected during their work assignments. The Anglins proved especially resourceful. From their jobs inside the prison, they smuggled glue, brushes, rubber, and even hair from the barbershop floor. This hair was used to make realistic decoys, dummy heads sculpted from soap and toilet paper. These were placed in their beds at night to fool the guards during head counts. By June 11, 1962, everything was ready. The holes in the cell walls opened into an unguarded utility corridor. From there, they climbed to the roof, slipped down the side of the building, and made their way to the northeast shore of the island. That night, fog covered the bay, hiding their movements from watchtowers. They inflated the raft, strapped on their makeshift life vests, and pushed off into the cold, dark water. The bay's conditions were brutal. The water hovered between 50 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and the currents were strong enough to exhaust even strong swimmers. It was nearly 2 miles to Angel Island, the shortest possible crossing, but without the raft, survival would have been unlikely. That raft was their lifeline, the product of months of careful preparation. By morning, the guards found their cells empty. The decoy heads were convincing enough that the alarm had not been raised during the night, giving the escapees a critical head start. The search that followed was massive. Over the next few days, authorities found a few clues: a paddle floating in the bay, a waterproof bag with some of the Anglins' belongings, pieces of the raft near the Golden Gate Bridge, and a damaged homemade life vest. But there were no bodies and no confirmed sightings. The official view from the prison was that they had drowned. The warden and many investigators believed the frigid water and strong currents had claimed them before they reached land. Yet, the skill of their planning and the timing of their escape led others to think otherwise. Years later, tidal simulations suggested that if they had launched at just the right moment, they could have drifted safely to shore. Over the decades, hints have surfaced. A photo supposedly showing the Anglin brothers in Brazil, Christmas cards sent to their family, and even a letter in 2013 claiming survival. None of it has been definitively proven, leaving the mystery unsolved. But how is it possible that a steel box will be placed in the ocean for decades without any trace or histories of missing properties? Could it possibly be from the escapees? The mystery of the safe beneath the waters of Alcatraz. One of the most intriguing ideas is that the safe might be connected to Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, the men behind the 1962 escape that still fascinates the world. Their breakout was planned with incredible care, using handmade tools, fake heads to fool guards, and a raft stitched from raincoats. Some believe that the safe could have been part of that plan, hidden underwater to hold supplies, cash, or documents that would help them start new lives once they reached land. Inside the safe were old bills, photographs, and maps. These weren't the kind of random items someone would toss away. They hinted at purpose, at value, at least to someone at that time. If the escapees really did place the safe there, it suggests they either had outside help or planned to return for it themselves. But no record exists of anyone ever trying to retrieve it. For decades, it lay forgotten, hidden beneath the tides, waiting to be discovered. There's another possibility. Maybe the safe had nothing to do with the prisoners at all. Alcatraz wasn't only a home for dangerous criminals. It was also a workplace for guards, administrators, and contractors. Supplies came in regularly. Construction and maintenance work was constant. Could the safe have belonged to someone in the prison's staff? Perhaps it was lost in an accident, falling from a boat or barge into the bay. Or maybe it was deliberately hidden by someone trying to cover up corruption, smuggling, or some other wrongdoing. The contents don't rule this out. Maps showing stormwater tunnels and possible escape routes might have been part of routine maintenance records, or something more secret. They could have belonged to someone with inside knowledge of the prison's structure, someone who wanted that information hidden. San Francisco Bay itself has a long and colorful history of secret dealings. During Prohibition, smugglers used it to run liquor. Later, organized crime used its waters for other kinds of contraband. It's not impossible that the safe was linked to such operations. Alcatraz, isolated and heavily guarded, could have served as a perfect drop point. In that case, the safe might have been hidden for retrieval by criminals unrelated to the prison escape, but caught forever in the bay's currents. To understand how the safe got to its resting place, oceanographers and marine archaeologists are studying the water. The bay's tides and currents are powerful, and the safe was found in a known tidal drift corridor west of the island. This is an area where objects, whether floating or sinking, can be carried away from their original location. Over the years, ships and barges have lost cargo here, and many vessels have sunk in these waters. It's possible the safe traveled before finally settling where it was found. Even without concrete answers, the discovery has drawn the attention of authorities. While the FBI hasn't formally reopened the case, they've called the safe a potentially significant artifact of historical and criminal interest. The National Park Service, which manages Alcatraz today, is also taking it seriously, calling the find unusual and worth investigating. Some of the most intriguing comments have come from those who once worked the case. Retired FBI agent Bill Baker, part of the original investigation, noted that the maps and photographs inside suggest more than just a desperate last-minute escape. He recalled strange gaps in the case, missing files, unaccounted supplies, suspicious visitors that never quite made sense. Baker even mentioned a letter that surfaced in 2018, supposedly from John Anglin, claiming that he and the others had help from people willing to take big risks, either out of loyalty or because they wanted to see the system beaten. If true, it strengthens the idea that there may have been safe houses, rendezvous points, or hidden caches, like this safe, waiting for them on the outside. At the moment, experts are testing everything found inside. They're studying the paper, the ink, the corrosion on the metal, hoping to confirm its age and origins. They're being careful not to jump to conclusions, but the excitement is clear. Whether it turns out to be a piece of the 1962 escape puzzle or a relic from some other hidden chapter of the bay's history, one thing is certain. This discovery has stirred the waters around Alcatraz again. And just like the famous escape itself, it may leave us with more questions than answers. But could any of these be true? Let's find out from the confession of one of the members who was also supposed to escape with them that night. Alan West's untold part of the Alcatraz escape. Alan West's story is unlike the rest. While 3 men vanished into the night during the most daring prison break in American history, West remained behind, watching the chance of freedom slip away in the space of a few critical minutes. His name is often mentioned in passing when the Alcatraz escape of June 1962 is told, but his part of the story holds its own share of suspense, frustration, and unanswered questions. West had been at Alcatraz since 1957, long enough to understand its rigid routines, relentless security, and the unspoken bonds between certain inmates. Over the years, he became close to 3 fellow prisoners, Frank Morris and brothers Clarence and John Anglin. Their cells were next to each other, which meant whispered conversations through the walls and subtle exchanges of tools and materials went unnoticed by most guards. These quiet connections would eventually grow into a full-blown plan for one of the most famous escapes ever attempted. The plan was no impulsive dream. It was the result of months of meticulous preparation. The men knew Alcatraz's reputation. No one had ever successfully escaped. To get out, they would need more than courage. They needed flawless timing, clever engineering, and complete secrecy. West contributed as much as anyone. His cell wall, like the others, hid a weak spot behind the sink. Night after night, he chipped away at the concrete with makeshift tools, disguising the progress with cardboard and paint during the day. Beyond his own escape route, West helped gather and prepare essential materials for the group. Raincoats were stolen and stitched together to make life jackets and a makeshift raft. Wooden paddles were shaped and hidden. Paper, soap, and paint were transformed into realistic dummy heads to place on their pillows, buying them precious hours before guards realized they were gone. Every piece had to be perfect. As June 11, 1962 approached, everything seemed ready. The men had rehearsed their movements in silence, each one knowing exactly where to go and what to do. That night was supposed to be their moment. Under the cover of darkness, they began the final phase, slipping through the holes in their cells into a hidden utility corridor that would lead them to the roof and, eventually, the water. One by one, the others made it through their openings, but when West tried to crawl out, disaster struck. The hole he had worked on for months was just a fraction too small. That tiny miscalculation, mere inches, stood between him and the chance of freedom. He tried desperately to widen the gap. Using every tool at hand, he chipped and pried at the stubborn concrete. But minutes were slipping away, and time was their greatest enemy. The longer they delay, the greater the risk of discovery. Morris and the Anglin brothers had to make a decision. Waiting could mean losing their chance entirely. Without a word, they moved on, leaving West behind. When dawn came, the prison erupted in chaos. Guards discovered the dummy heads, the holes, and the missing prisoners. The sirens blared across the island. West, still in his cell, knew the escape had failed for him, but not for the others. Faced with certain questioning, he chose to tell the authorities everything: how they built the tunnels, where they worked on the raft, and what the intended destination was. Some later speculated that Morris and the Anglins might have changed their route after realizing West could reveal details, but there was no proof. In truth, no one knew exactly what happened after the three men reached the water. They vanished without a trace, leaving behind only speculation, theories, and mystery. For West, the ending was more certain. He never touched the raft, never felt the cold waves of the San Francisco Bay against his hands. He wasn't afraid of the escape. He had been ready for it. But one small error kept him locked inside. When Alcatraz closed in 1963, he was moved to another prison to serve the rest of his sentence, carrying with him the memory of that night. Why this is still one of the most talked about mystery ever. The Alcatraz escape story is more than a piece of history. It's a living legend. It speaks of nerve, precision, and the determination of three prisoners, Frank Morris and Clarence and John Anglin, who set out to leave one of the most secure prisons in the world. They weren't reckless. They spent months designing tools, making disguises, and even crafting a raft from stolen raincoats. The official account ends with their presumed deaths in the icy waters of the San Francisco Bay, but the lack of proof has kept the door open for doubt. The safe changes the way that doubt feels. Instead of a rumor or a photograph that could be dismissed, this is an actual object, heavy, tangible, and pulled from the very waters tied to the escape route. Inside were not just old bills and personal items, but things that hinted at preparation and careful planning. Maps, photographs, and notes that could point to more than the official story allows. It is this physical connection that makes people pause. It is not the same as hearing a tale from a friend's uncle. This is something that can be examined, tested, and placed in context. Modern science only adds to the intrigue. Forensic dating methods can look at the paper, the ink, the corrosion, even the patterns of water damage, giving clues that would have been impossible to find decades ago. If those materials match the time frame of the escape, It could change the way historians view that night entirely. It might not prove survival, but it could make the idea far more plausible. This isn't the first time new evidence has stirred the waters of this case. Over the years, there have been reports, sightings, letters, even a mysterious note said to be from one of the Anglin brothers in 2018. Each time, people lean in, wanting to know if the impossible really happened. The safe is different, though. It is not hearsay. It's a physical artifact that demands explanation. The reason it matters now is the same reason the original escape has never faded from conversation. It challenges the finality of the official account. If 3 men truly made it past the guards, across the water, and into a life of anonymity, then the boundaries of what was thought possible shift. That's why, more than 60 years later, people still care. Not only about whether these men lived, but about how they might have pulled it off, and what became of them afterward. The safe's journey didn't end when it was hauled from the bay. It was carefully transported to a specialized conservation facility where experts are working slowly to protect and analyze every detail. Each item is being handled under controlled conditions to prevent further damage. Specialists are examining the currency for signs of when it was last handled, testing the paper for fibers unique to certain years, and studying photographs for any background clues, shapes of buildings, styles of clothing, or features of vehicles that could be tied to a specific time and place. Even the faintest fingerprint or smudge could shift the investigation. While the odds of finding one after decades underwater are small, the possibility alone is enough to keep forensic teams methodically checking every surface. Meanwhile, analysis of the maps could reveal whether they matched known city plans from the 1960s or contained markings not available to the public at the time. Any such detail would point toward the documents being directly connected to the escape plan rather than random possessions lost to the bay. Around the discovery site, independent divers have begun their own small-scale searches, hoping to find other objects, perhaps tools, clothing, or another container that could have been discarded in the rush to leave or hidden intentionally. So far, no one has stepped forward to claim the safe or admit knowledge of its placement. That silence leaves room for speculation. Was it hidden by someone who helped the escapees? Was it left behind in a moment of urgency? Or is it just one fragment of a much larger story waiting beneath the water? The FBI is watching closely, though no decision has been made about reopening the original case. After all these years, official action requires evidence strong enough to hold weight in a file that's been closed for decades. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.